Oh, did I ever tell you?
That's the best you could come up with, Brad?
Well, did I ever tell you about Stuart story from Universal Studios when I was a kid?
No.
No, I'll tell you this real quick. I think we really will start this episode.
This is every week.
Every week.
Hey, we're making good time though. You should have told about 9:30.
Wait till 9:30. So I promise, Kevin, we'll get started. But I got.
Oh, you're fine.
It's a really funny story. So, Mom sends me on a missions trip with the local church. It was all the teenagers. We go to Tampa, and then we do a bunch of work. And then one day we headed over and went to Universal Studios. And I don't know if you've ever been to Universal Studios, but there's this really ancient ride. It's an ET ride. It's really boring and stuff. But when it came out, it was so cool because ET would talk to you. So you would go into it and they would ask you your name before you started the ride, and you go on the ride, and then ET is supposed to say goodbye to you using your name. It was really cool technology at the time. So I don't know what possessed me as I walked in. They said, "What's your name?" I said, "Stuart." And it just kidding me, right? So we go through the ride. So I'm leaving, and I come up to where ET is about to tell me, goodbye, Stuart. But right as he did, he broke. Did I never told you guys this story?
No.
But he breaks, and he's like, "Goodbye, Stuart." It could not have gone any better. It was just right. I mean, like, everybody would break. It's like, it's Stuart, and he just screamed until they he literally unplugged it. It was just the best.
This is what happens when you sin, Eric. I saw that and took it on that poor animatronic alien. For shame.
Oh, man.
Well, on that note, welcome to the show, Me and Your Mom, a show where three people sit down to talk about whatever they want to talk about. I'm your host, Eric, and we're joined today by our other two hosts, my best friend, Brandon.
Hey.
And my mom.
Hello.
Her name is Sandy. We also have a very special guest. We're going to talk a little bit about him in just a moment, but to quickly introduce him, his name is Kevin. Thank you for coming today, Kevin.
Thanks for having me.
So how are you guys?
Well, I'm well. Since we're going to have that awkward pause, I'm going to jump in and stop it.
We really should designate that. Like, Sandy, you should go first.
Yeah, we got to have that tradition.
Yeah.
Everybody's very polite.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we feel like the chipmunks. So how are you tonight, Kevin? How about that? We'll bounce it to you.
I'm doing great. Actually, it's funny. Right before this recording started, we had just lost power for like almost an hour. So I was like, oh, of course, out of all the days that we could lose, all of Pigeon Forge could lose power, it's today.
That's rough.
But yeah, I'm good. I'm here.
Well, good. We're glad you're here.
Amen.
I'm happy to be here.
Well, about you, Brandon? We get to skip it over to you, bud.
Oh, doing pretty good. Had my niece's kind of little just family birthday party this past weekend. She turned 2, so there was, a lot of toys that she probably won't even care about and just go for the boxes instead. But no, we had a good time, and it was good to see them. And yeah, work's been work lately. But other than that, it's good. Having a weird warm spell up in Michigan. It's been in the 70s since like Thursday, Friday.
Mm-hmm. It's been like 80 here.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, considering it's November in Michigan, yes, warm spell. All the trees are off the leaves, and now we're back in shorts and T-shirts again.
I would
It's weird when you have to break the bug spray back out.
Yeah.
That is a bit weird, but I would kill for 70s right about now. We're having to deal with a tropical storm that will never leave.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, just
Like this.
around. But there's already another storm forming off the coast of Africa we've got to look forward to. So it's always something.
2020 just will not end.
It will not. We are just like, we're not just limping to the finish line of 2012. We're like crawling desperately, like, the zombies in Walking Dead where they're just crawling around like missing their legs.
And why are we so sure that on January 1st, 2021, that things are going to get better all of a sudden?
Get out. We don't need that.
Is that too much negativity or too much realism for you? Yeah.
Yes.
It's like everyone's like, will this year be over? And I'm thinking, well, is that going to change? What's going on? But okay.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah,
Is that how it works?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I just think back to like 2016 when like Prince passed away and David Bowie and Alan Rickman, and just like back to back, all these celebrities were going like 2016, will you never end? And like 2020, Brandon is just looking back going, oh, my sweet summer child. Just,
As long as we can keep Betty White, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we just lost Sir Sean and Sir
We
Alex.
did. Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
I don't know if he was actually knighted. Probably not, but I can
Well,
dream.
I can knight him, right?
He was knighted in my heart.
Yes, yes.
Other than that, we're doing okay. I just want to do a quick shout out to all our listeners. I had so many listeners respond to me and let me know that they were sending their thoughts and prayers to my family after the death of my mother-in-law. I just want to say thank you very much. It meant a lot to us that you did, and really, really, hit us in our heart that you guys were so responsive and letting us know that. I had a few people tell me, take as much time as you need off for the podcast. That's, my family's most important. And that just meant a lot to me. I love doing the podcast. I absolutely love it. It's just an excuse to get together with my favorite people in the world, and that's it. So I didn't want to take too much time off. Right there's a heart. Too much time off, but thank you for that. My wife is doing better. Her family is very strong. There's a lot of laughs and a lot of tears, but it was a funeral there where your ancestors would be proud of, if I can use that expression. It was a good funeral. Exactly.
So there was some kind of catharsis.
Yeah, there was.
That's good. That's good.
It was good, and we had a big showing, for people that cared about her, and it was good. It was good. So thank you for everybody that was listening and sent their thoughts and wishes to us. We really appreciate it. So, yeah. So, well, we have a special guest. And
We do.
We do. And Mom, since you know our special guest, I thought you would have the wonderful privilege and honor of introducing him.
Well, I get to, and I'm excited to do this because this is Kevin, and Kevin has volunteered to come here and talk to us about his therapy journey as he worked through some trauma things. And so, first of all, I want to acknowledge the courage that it takes to do that. I think to honor that for just a moment and to appreciate that. So thank you for doing that, Kevin. So I know we talked about it some. Well, it does take a lot of courage to do this, but we talked about it some. But I'm wondering if you just want to start with your story a little bit and just tell us a bit about who you are and how we came to meet, maybe, but the long way around. How about that?
Okay, the long way around. Okay. Well, I'm originally from Argentina. I moved to the United States. I think I had my 10th birthday here. I remember that. And then we lived here for about, I want to say about 6-8 months. And then I found out that we were technically illegal. So then we've been here since 2001. And then it wasn't until, went through high school and all that stuff, and you just kind of realize the impact that has on you as you kind of go around. And then I'm trying to figure out the long way around, but I think I'm shortening it.
No,
a lot has happened along the way, and then the affirmative action happened with Obama and I was considered a dreamer, so that technically started giving me a little bit more options, and it allowed me to be able to work legally, drive, and do a lot of the stuff that I honestly didn't think was ever going to be possible. And then throughout time, work, and I kind of had switched jobs. I used to make pottery for like 10 years of my life, which was one of the coolest jobs ever. And then long story short, I was starting a studio with some friends, and fires came through in 2016. And the studio that had just opened up with some friends burned. And it was kind of a hard restart. So I think that kind of started causing a little bit of anxiety problems and all kinds of things, all that life change. And then I switched jobs and I went to a sales job, which was probably not one that I loved really. And I was there for about 2 years. And then long story short, I kind of started getting a lot of anxiety. Like I actually started getting anxiety attacks while I was there in the mornings. And then I had started having trouble sleeping a little bit. And in between that, there was when I was in my teenage years, there was a lot of abuse that happened in my home with my dad. And that was always a rocky relationship from not from the beginning. Well, maybe, but I guess it was just a lot of stuff I didn't realize I hadn't dealt with. And you say that it takes a lot of courage to kind of come in here and talk about it, but honestly, I think it took more courage to start therapy in a weird way, because that was kind of one of the biggest decisions, because I feel like there's this stigma of like when somebody tells you need to go get help or something, like it's like almost an insult. And it's probably one of the best things I've ever done with my life, and it just took, I had thought about it for years, it felt like, and then I finally decided to try it out, and I got paired up with your mom, and it was almost like a perfect match, and I was able to deal with a lot of stuff, my anxiety and a lot of my trauma in the past. And the amount of progress I feel like I have made has just changed my life. And that's how we met. In a long, short way around.
Yeah, no, that was good. So I wonder, Kevin, when you're thinking about the things that you actually presented with, your symptoms is what I would call it, but you mentioned your anxiety. What kinds of things, all that trauma that you brought forward, in what ways was it manifesting in your life that people who are listening might be able to relate to?
Yeah, honestly, mine started, I would feel myself like my stomach would start almost tightening. And it's weird because I haven't felt it in so long. I almost like, you start almost forgetting a little bit. And I would have trouble breathing a little bit. And I remember I started feeling a little shaky too. I mean, it was just kind of like anxious. I mean, anxious is the only way I can put it. And my heart would start beating pretty hard, and I hadn't ever experienced anything like that. I've always been extremely physically healthy, and that was the first time that I realized how much it was actually impacting me physically, and I almost had no idea where it came from. And then sleeping, I had some trouble sleeping. I would wake up at night, and it almost felt like I was wide awake. It just wasn't like I would. When you wake up and you look at the clock, I mean, I was wide awake, and I couldn't fall back asleep for a little while. And then, so my sleeping was off, and I don't think that helped the anxiety throughout the day either. So that's the main things I remember.
Was there something in particular that you would notice that would cause, I guess the word for trigger for that? Because I've had some similar experiences like that too, where I was getting the knots or my chest was tightening. It usually had something to do with work or a family situation. Was that the same for you, or?
Yeah, it was a little bit of both. I noticed it mostly when I was at work, just because I anticipated it was a sales job. So I felt like every day I was very much anticipating if it was going to be a good or a bad day, and there was a lot of pressure. So I would say that would be the first trigger. And then the second one was when I was around my dad. I definitely felt it a lot being around him, and I could just feel it. Just you just learn to live with it almost. It's just when we would have family get-togethers and he would come around. I remember always feeling it, but it was almost like I had gotten used to it by then. And it's weird because now I notice how much I felt it because it's almost gone completely. So it was, yeah. So that was technically my triggers.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I always found it was like that. It was sometimes I would live without that sense of dread, but the problem with the dread is, for me anyway, I don't know if you relate, but for me, it started off with just certain triggers, but over time it just became a complete sense of dread all the time, even when I wasn't being triggered. I don't know if that's the same for you, but I would find that kind of, or even when I was supposed to be down from work, I'd still feel that sense of tightness in the chest, that sort of thing. So is that about right for you as well, or what do you think?
Yeah, I think honestly, as soon as I started feeling more like physical, like especially with work, it started getting pretty, I don't want to say really intense, because I don't know how other people, what other people's anxiety attacks feel like. But for me, I just knew that there was something wrong. So I tried to get help as quickly as I could. I didn't feel that, hopefully I didn't let it get to that point where it was feeling that dread throughout the day. But definitely, I mean, now that you mentioned that, I guess around the house, if I was around my parents' house, I felt some form of dread if I knew my dad was there. So it was just constantly like a dark cloud almost when he was around. But yeah,
That makes sense.
So, Kevin, I wonder, and of course, whatever you're comfortable with and whatever you're not is okay.
yeah.
Right? I just want to make sure that we're saying that. But I wonder, you're talking about two different types of, well, actually three different types of trauma. You're talking about your undocumented experience, which
Hmm.
is something that many of our listeners may or may not be familiar with, and what that is like. You mentioned the fires. Some of you may remember the big fires in Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge area is what Kevin was alluding to. So there's that, and then there's the trauma around your dad. So I'm wondering if you might pick one or two of them, and maybe if you feel comfortable telling us what that trauma was like for you in some ways, and what you experienced.
Yeah. Well, we can just start with the undocumented one since that was the first one on the list. That one, you kind of just grow up almost getting used to the fact that, it wasn't until I became a teenager that I realized how much impact that had, because when you're a kid, you get brought into this country and my parents had no intention of, bringing us here illegally by any means. It was just something that just so happened, and which we can get into that here in a little bit. But when I became a teenager, all my friends started turn 16 and were able to drive, and everybody starts making those plans for school and where they're going to go, and then I just realized, oh yeah, I'm a grade student and I don't know how many options there are for me now. And I think that just slowly kind of started making me feel like, oh, I just won't have any opportunities. And that's kind of how I felt most of my time until really I started getting documentation when the Dream Act came through. And that I immediately remember that day, and almost like a light, like if it's something flipped, and I was like, oh wow, I actually now have a lot of opportunities. But I did live with that idea of I'm just gonna get whatever job I can work that will accept me, and I won't be able to go to college. I won't be able to do all this stuff. So I lived with that for a long time, and I mean, it took a while for me to realize that now I can actually, I think we've talked about it. I almost feel overwhelmed because now I feel like I actually have a lot of opportunities and I can go anywhere and do whatever. And yeah, it's been a change, but yeah, I'm trying to figure out how that exactly impacted me. But I guess it gave me less confidence. I know that much.
Yeah,
So,
and I think it can be likened to not being allowed to be someplace, and you're kind of there, and the impact that might have on your self-esteem because you're really not supposed to be there, and even the language around that between illegal and undocumented, and how that can
yeah,
make it.
yeah, and I remember I almost wanted to be as American as I could, if that makes any sense.
Mhm.
When I was growing up, and I mean, I even remember when I would see police officers when I was younger, I would almost, instead of, when you grow up, you're taught that a police officer is there to help you, and you can go to the police for whatever you might need. But when I was younger, I always almost thought of them as like, oh, they could deport me, at any time. So I remember my family always grew up with the idea of like, we just don't get police involved if we have any issues, pretty much. And obviously if it's an emergency, you would, but yeah, I grew up with that stigma of almost being scared when I saw people of authority. Like they could just, that could end life as I knew it. But
Absolutely.
Yeah. I imagine that. I don't know what it's like to have your experience, but I imagine that there's a sense of isolation with that. You're in around people, but you're not with them at all times. I don't know if that's your experience, but it sounds like it would be. Kind of
yeah,
isolating. Yeah.
and I live in a state that I feel like a lot of people don't understand, immigration as much, and that's not, that's just the environment that you're in. And most of my friends had a certain stigma about illegal immigrants, and and their parents and everything. And they would say all these things out loud about how they were criminals and, just what people say. And had no idea that I, was an illegal immigrant at the time and had no idea. So that always made me feel a little awkward, when you go to a friend's family dinner and you hear all that stuff and you go, oh, I'm not supposed to be in this table if you guys knew that I was, so it almost feel like I was hiding a lot, and I wouldn't tell people much about me, except if they were extremely close, but I was always very careful. And yeah.
That's interesting. You have to live with a secret that you never asked for.
Yeah. And I didn't think too much about it. I guess so when I was growing up, it just felt like it was the normal. And it wasn't until I get a little older that I go, oh yeah, I guess I really did try to hide a lot more than
It's one of those burdens that you don't realize you're carrying it until you can get rid of it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I have to ask, I might be backing up a little bit. How did your family settle in Tennessee, of all places? I'm just dying.
I know, right? Yeah. So
I was hoping we would get to that.
I know.
I have to ask this.
So my dad worked in Buenos Aires, in Argentina. He I want to say it was his boss had a daughter that lived in Tennessee. And when he decided that we were going to make the move, he said, "Oh, I can just introduce you to my daughter and her husband and her family, and that would be a good way for you guys to contact them and it just happened to be in good old Tennessee, which is a big culture shock from the city." But
Yeah.
yeah, I remember telling my parents when we were on the Greyhound up this way, and my parents are like, "Oh, we're almost there." And I looked around and said, "Oh yeah, but when are we getting there?" I was like, "This isn't it, right?" And they're like, "No, this is it." And I was like, "Oh, okay,
No, this is what we're supposed to drive through to get there.
Are you sure?"
That's amazing.
Yes.
I had to ask. Thank you. That's amazing.
So Kevin, I think that plays into your biggest trauma. I think the fact that you were undocumented, which left you with little recourse. Are you able to go there with us tonight, do you think?
What do you mean?
Just talk about your trauma maybe with your dad a little bit.
Yeah, we can. So when I was a teenager, we moved to this country because my dad had an affair, and when he ended the affair, his the woman he had the affair with committed suicide, and her family was, I didn't find this out until later, but her family, I guess, was kind of looking for my dad, and they kind of made the decision of let's try to relocate. And at the time, Argentina was actually going through a pretty bad economic crisis, so it was kind of everybody was moving away or trying to figure out different, locations or so it just seemed like a good time to that's what we used to say to everybody, is that we moved here because of the jobs and everything. But come to find out later on that that's what had happened, and I guess I didn't realize how much impact that still had on my parents and my dad in particular throughout all the years that we were here. Because when I turned about 14, my dad was convinced that my mom, who, if you know my mom, she's as close to a saint as it gets. I mean, I say that, but obviously I'm a mom's boy. So, but my dad started, there was a lot of physical abuse that happened in my house, for a long time, because he thought that she was going to leave him and for somebody else. And that went on for a little while. I don't remember exactly how long, but I mean, there was just a lot of physical abuse that me and my sisters saw. And, sometimes he took his anger out on me, every once in a while. Not as often, but yeah, that just left me with a lot of resentment and anger that I honestly had no idea how much it actually stayed with me throughout my life. I guess I'm an old man now,
No.
but but yeah, and it started. I started seeing it more and more. But that's the biggest trauma that I felt, and that even made its way towards my 20s. Even when I moved out of the house, I could just I felt it. I felt when if my dad would call on the phone, I just would. I felt I didn't want to pick up. I felt anger. If I wanted to go see my mom, I would much rather have done it when he wasn't around, and that's when I felt a lot of that, almost like fighter, fighting, I guess, feeling when he was around, almost like I had to protect myself. But the abuse stopped a little bit, kind of on its own. It just almost started. I don't want to say it just died down, but it's almost like it just happened less and less, and then eventually my family just never dealt with it. We just kind of, it was, we never got police involved because the undocumentation factor, we didn't want to, my mom didn't want to risk us having to be deported and sent back. And at that point, she would tell you that we were Americanized, so it'd be difficult for us to go back and live in Argentina. So that was, yeah, I guess, when I was younger, I never even thought about why aren't we calling the police. It was just kind of something we just dealt with. And yeah, and that is probably the hardest part of therapy, was kind of having to almost relive those moments, that I think I had just sealed away forever and tried to never think about. And, but, kind of going through therapy and somebody who you trust walking you through everything really, really, really helped me kind of walk through the memories and put everything in the past and allow me to move forward. And, even my relationship with my dad, it's allowed me to forgive him for a lot of the things that happened, which I was never, ever able to do that before. I mean, I always told myself I would never forgive him for anything that had happened. And now it's kind of allowed me, peace of mind almost. And yeah, it's best thing I've ever done.
Which I'm so glad, but can you tell us at the beginning, as I know that as you progress, we changed what we were doing in therapy because you were progressing. But what are the things in the beginning that were more helpful for you in therapy? Because there were some things I think helped you pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think therapy was all fun and games until a certain moment, but it was so nice, and you were so gentle with me, and then eventually I was like, oh, we're getting serious now. I mean, I remember telling my wife, I was like, oh, therapy's becoming really hard now. But the first things were more mindfulness. That was probably the biggest thing that I immediately saw a change in. So more meditation and being more aware of the present and now. So that you started showing me kind of exercises, breathing exercises, and ways to almost, you remember it was the being present, feeling, closing your eyes, paying attention to the breath, and then feeling, like every part of your body kind of relax and move around. And that immediately would stop my anxiety, which was the best one. Actually, now I remember one. You told me that when I started feeling anxiety, it was almost like, I can't remember how you said it exactly, but you'll remember it. It was like squeezing almost just as hard, like my
that was
stomach,
pulling your belly button back to your backbone is how I say that one.
That's right, belly button back to the backbone.
Yeah,
and
try to touch your backbone with your belly button.
Yeah, and that was like almost like a perfect way just to, if I felt it coming on, that would like help everything tighten, and then when I relax, I would feel it more relaxed. So things like that kind of helped me deal with it in the moment when I felt the anxiety attacks coming on. Those were the main things, and then we started.
I was just going to say, I was just going to say, those are actually things that anyone can learn. When I first started using them, I was working with children. That's why I found that no matter how I said it to the kids, if I said it that way to the adults, it was probably best. So being present, being mindful, doing the body scans, focusing on your breath, Things like touching your belly button to your backbone and holding it as long as you can before you let it go. Literally, I learned to do that with children, and yet it works well for me anyway. So sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't want to interrupt. I just wanted to say that because
No.
they're easy things to learn. So go ahead and keep telling
No, it
me.
worked for me too. Yeah. And then I kind of started incorporating that, like you had mentioned, all those exercises, try to do it daily. And I'm used to kind of going to the gym a lot anyways, but I almost treated that as I think we've said this, like the gym for your mind, and then just kind of making sure that you take the time every day just to focus on yourself and your mental health a little bit with that. And that seemed to almost stabilize it a little more as I went through. But then we got into the real therapy.
I was going to say, when did you know, and what happened to let you know that, oh yeah, she's getting serious at this point?
Yeah. You said, hey, how do you feel about, and then I knew that was going to be something more serious, but it was EMDR is what we started working with. And I had no idea what it was really at the time. I mean, but I think, do you want to explain what it is? You'll explain it a lot better than me. So.
Well, yeah, I can explain it, then you can talk about your experience. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so EMDR actually stands for eye movement desensitization reprocessing. However, we didn't do eye movement with Kevin, but it actually works with the learning theory and the way that our brains associate together. And so really what it says is the neurons that fire together wire together. So if you've experienced trauma, you have wired things to work in a certain way. And while it's doing that and continuing to fire, it's almost as if you're continuing to experience that moment in time, always and forever. You never actually put it in the past. You're always experiencing it. And so EMDR works. It doesn't have to be eye movement, and I'll tell you what we did in a minute. But it works by stimulating your brain bilaterally while you're processing the memories. And you literally process those memories over and over again while you bilaterally stimulate the brain. And it breaks neuronic pathways of the trauma and it fires them elsewhere and kind of disperses it. And then after a while, it eventually moves to the past, so that when you finish your EMDR, that memory that you've been processing, it's still there. I mean, you still have it, but it's actually a memory and you're able to step away from it and it doesn't feel so intense and you feel much more present, and that's in the past and it is what it is and I'm okay. I mean, that's literally how it works.
So how does that work out? Like that was a really great technical definition, and I'm not trying to be braggy here. I consider myself a fairly smart individual, but I still don't know exactly, like, so is this a conversation you're happening while you're maybe listening to something? No. Is it like what how does this work? How does this break down exactly?
That's a really good question. So we did ours online because I've known Kevin since right before COVID, and we've always been online. So since I only do online therapy anyway, wouldn't have mattered whether we had COVID or not, right? But how we actually did it is we discuss what's going to happen. So he knows what the session's going to look like, and I'm going to explain that in a second. I explain a SUD scale. That's a subjective unit of distress. So I will say 0 meaning no distress at all, 10 meaning the greatest distress you can imagine. You know, when you think about this memory, where are you? Kevin will think of a memory, and he's got the memory in his head. I don't even have to know the memory. He does not even have to tell me what the memory is. He can. You know, the client can tell, and I'm going to step away from Kevin for just a minute, you know, so that I don't make him feel so personalized. But, you know, the client doesn't have to tell me anything about the memory. I just ask questions such as, can you think of the worst part, the most traumatic part of that memory? When you think of that, you know, what do you feel? What are your emotions? What do you feel in your body? You know, I'll ask those questions, and then I'll ask on a scale of 0 to 10, you know, where are you? And once they do that, then I will have them process that memory. That means literally they will start running it like a movie scene. And I actually use that language, run the scene, and have them run it through like a movie over and over and over again in their head. Now for Kevin, because we were online, and at the time I couldn't screen share with him to do an eye movement, we did tapping. So I had him make like a butterfly with his hands, and he tapped on himself. I literally sat quietly while he processed and tapped, and watched him. And as I watched his face, I would look for changes in his expressions. And occasionally I would interrupt and I would say, is this an okay time? Because one of the ground rules is if I interrupt and this is not okay, please tell me it's not okay. We discussed that. And so is this an okay time to do a check-in? And then I will ask him, what's coming up for you right now? How are you feeling right now? What are you noticing right now? Those kinds of questions. He would answer. Then I would ask him, are you okay to go with that? And if he says yes, then I'll say, then run the scene again, focusing on that, and start tapping again.
Okay.
And literally he just taps and runs that scene over and over again. And after a while I'll interrupt and say, okay, on that scale of 0 to 10, where are you? Almost always they'll be further down that scale than they started out. Actually, I've never had anyone not be further down that scale.
Sure.
Sometimes they will be like, I'm at a 9 when they start. By the time I interrupt before the end of the session, where are you? Or when I interrupt and I say, where are you? Sometimes they'll say, about a 1. And I'll ask them, what keeps you from being a 0? And have them focus on that if it's not at 0. And then they tap some more. I have a very strict script, actually, but it's I literally sit quietly, like I'm quiet. Those are just so quiet sessions. I just sit and watch, and it's quiet, and it's harder for me than it sounds. I just want to say this because you should just sit and really focus on someone and knowing that they're going through this pain and not being able to do anything else but to be support there. It's actually they're pretty intense for both myself, but especially for the clients. Does that answer your question, Brandon?
Yeah, absolutely. That was exactly what I was looking for. Thank you.
I have intimate knowledge of EMDR, actually. I've gone through it a lot myself. So I'm curious, Kevin, how did you, when you started going through this process that Mom was taking you through, what was your thought processes? How did you respond emotionally? How did you respond physically? I mean, that's an interesting process. Mom just described someone healing themselves. That's what's so interesting about EMDR. So I'm curious, what was it like going through it the first time, and how did you respond emotionally, physically, mentally? I'm just curious.
Yeah, the first time I really had no idea what it really meant to go through EMDR. I mean, I just knew that I trusted, the person that was going to be walking me through it quite a bit, which I felt like was probably the most important part, because if I'm going to be sitting there really trying to focus and close my eyes and having somebody walk me through trauma, that was very, very important. But I guess the first time was probably the most vivid memory I had, the one that impacted me the most. And so that one was pretty, for me, emotional. I mean, I hadn't taken the time to really sit down and kind of walk through the whole thing. I feel like throughout my life, I kind of would get glimpses of what had happened, but I never sat down and really just try to walk through everything that happened in a session, which was, it almost feels like you're in there in an eternity. But I felt the tightness in my stomach as we kind of went through it, because just the images that kind of were going through my head. I felt a lot of emotion. I felt everybody's very different, but the more I walked through it, it almost felt like I could pick out different things that I didn't see before in that memory. Whether it be something that I had actually noticed while I was, in the bedroom, or when I something I saw in the background, or even things that I didn't even remember my mom actually doing. And just the more I walked through, the more I just kind of started remembering more and more, even to the point where I had even talked to your mom about it. My dad smokes, and at one point I smelled cigarettes. Like it was and it was it was very, very crazy, because I remember him smoking while he was kind of walking around, and I was, that's when I knew, oh wow, this is very intense. I can remember a lot more than just an image.
Yeah.
But yeah, you definitely feel almost like not the anxiety. I felt almost like a survival thing. I guess like my stomach and my chest would tighten up a little bit. I felt the emotions again, like helplessness and like anger and all that kind of comes through. And then like, like she was mentioning, I started at a certain level, and then as everything started moving through, it did almost feel like a movie. And like at one point, it almost felt like I was just a camera, just kind of walking around the scene. And slowly but surely, everything started feeling less heavy, for lack of a better term. And then eventually just moved past it to where it felt like it was in the past. And I just stopped feeling all the anger I kind of was holding on to. And it's just crazy. Yeah. All these years of holding on to something, and you go through
Yeah.
some sessions of EMDR, and then you start feeling a lot better.
Yeah, that's kind of similar to my experience. I came in and it was something similar to yours. They were like, okay, but for me, it was actually, for those who are listening or are interested in EMDR, that's why I'm talking about the different methods of EMDR. But for me, it wasn't the tapping on the chest. It was headphones, and there was tones that would alternate between my ears. That was the way they did
Mhm.
it for me. And they said, okay, we're going to alternate tones between your ears, and then you're going to live it, and you're going to heal yourself. And I don't know about you, but I was extremely skeptical. Just a smidge. But what you said was true. I really trusted this person. And that's the number one most important thing for those that are interested in trying this. If you're working through trauma, trust, you have to have trust with your provider of EMDR therapy. You do have.
Mhm.
It's interesting how you're telling me how you could smell the cigarette smoke. And the reason I asked that, other than, for education purposes, I'm just dying dying to hear what other people's experience through EMDR is. Mine, my whole body would shudder and I would shake. And then there was several times where I jumped up off the couch
Whoa.
and started running for the door. So it was a particular memory I was working through, where my immediate response was, I was in danger, I need to run. And so my body was
Yeah.
physically doing that. And you say, well, Eric, how can you not be in control of your body? Well, you have to understand, for those that are listening, when you're going through EMDR, you are in essence reliving that experience, and your body relives it. So for your body, it's very, very real. So, I think it's interesting that you're bringing up how your body was responding. You got the pit in your stomach and all that sort of stuff. When you pass through that emotional time, so you were highly emotional. Were you highly emotional going through it, or was it like 90 to nothing when you started EMDR? Does that make sense when I'm asking? I'm just curious, because when I sat down, I thought I was in control of my anxiety, but 5 minutes into EMDR, I was a complete mess. Is that somewhere similar to
Yeah.
your experience?
I feel like I don't really cry like or get that emotional as much as I can. But the first EMDR session, I mean, I remember I was just tapping away and kind of reliving everything. And then it just like all of a sudden I didn't even realize I was crying in the beginning. It just felt like I just felt almost like the movement in my cheek, and you just kind of, it's just weird. It did go, I guess, from 0 to 90 pretty quickly. And then, when all the abuse and stuff was happening, I did feel a lot of, like, I froze a lot and I felt like helpless. So like it's like my body would almost, yeah, almost relive that. I mean, it is crazy. I mean, I wasn't jumping going through a door, but in my situation, it was more of just, I felt more, that's kind of how, when abuse and stuff happened, I froze and I would just stay in place. So I definitely felt that a lot.
And a couple of things, just to remember that everyone has a go-to fight, flight, or freeze mode. We can do any of them, but we all have a different one for different types of experiences. So,
Hmm.
Eric, you described the flight mode, where Kevin, you described the freeze mode. Mine
Hmm.
typically is the freeze mode most of the time.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's the fight mode, but when my son gets run over, that's when I jump into the
Right.
flight mode. I'm wondering about in between sessions, because part of EMDR, and one of the things that we talked about in session, is at the end of the session, you don't just walk out and be done. your body continues to process between
I wish.
sessions. Yeah, you wish it was that way. I know. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, can you tell a little bit about how you continue to process even after we were done with our sessions? And maybe Eric, you might want to share a little bit of yours too, since you're sharing. So,
Yeah. I definitely had to let my wife know the days that we were doing EMDR, because those days were more, I guess I was emotionally sensitive. And, you had mentioned that I'd be probably processing it through, but I mostly felt it at night in my dreams. That's the main way that I remember feeling, like parts of the, whether it be the abuse or just something in the background, or I think I even mentioned this one to you. There was, we used to have this neon car, this little old neon, and I had dreamed that I was in that car, and I can't remember the dream that well, but like things from all the trauma would start appearing in the dreams. And I think my brain was mostly processing it at night. And yeah, it would be, I would say a couple of days afterwards, I would wake up and go, oh wow, it's been 2 days since EMDR, and I just had a crazy dream about everything. And yeah, your brain's a pretty phenomenal thing.
it really is.
Yeah.
They do eventually go away, just so for those who are listening.
They sure do. Let me mention that part. I don't dream about the trauma anymore.
Yeah, he was processing and working it through, so I thought we would just
Great.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm curious, Kevin. This is something that I'm just talking personally. Other than the dreams, did you have any unusual physical tics that developed after a session? I'm just curious. Just if it's no, that's fine. I'm just
No, I can't remember any. Did you?
Yeah. I developed a serious stutter.
Wow.
I went through a particular strenuous EMDR session. It was like you. It was probably the biggest trauma I ever had in my whole life. It was very difficult, and I developed a stutter. And it was really interesting. I didn't develop a stutter right after the session. It was about 4 or 5 hours after that I suddenly couldn't speak without stuttering badly. Unfortunately, that continued for 2 days until I could go and see my EMDR specialist again.
Oh, wow.
And she had to fix me.
She broke him.
Here's the conversation. I was stuttering so badly. My wife had to call my therapist and say, I don't know what you did to him, but he needs to be fixed. And my therapist, what are you talking about? He's like, he's stuttering and he can't stop. So I think it's interesting how you process through with dreams.
Wow.
I began really stuttering so badly that I couldn't go to work for a while because I speak for a living. It was interesting how, and the reason I bring this up is because it's really interesting if you're interested in doing it, understand the process is different for everybody else. I'm not saying you're going to stutter. In fact, I was told I might be the first one that ever did that. But,
Congratulations, you're a case study.
I know.
He's always been a case study. That's why I had him.
Also, oddly enough, during those 2 days, never had a better tennis swing.
Yeah, well, during those 2 days, so here's the thing before you move on, I do have to tell this. He was trying to keep it from me because he didn't want me to worry about him because he knows that I would be worried. So I had to text him and say that my husband had a serious heart attack. So he had to call, of course, right? Because Macon almost didn't make it.
Yeah.
And he's stuttering, and I'm like, what do I do with this right now? Of all the times for me to need to talk to him on the phone, it was like,
for sure,
dude. He's like, well, I didn't want to tell you. Well, he didn't say it that fast, of course, because he was
oh no.
I can say that because I had a stutter as a kid. I had to have 3 years of speech therapy, but yeah. So anyway, sorry to interrupt, but it was like,
fine.
geez,
So
dude.
I do think it's interesting. I want to mention something that you said, Kevin. You talked about you had to warn your wife. I have to admit that I had to do the same, and I was emotionally sensitive too. I found myself tearing up or whatever, or wanting to run out the door and stuff, and I had some unusual behavior. With that in mind, you were saying that it goes away after a couple of days. Is that what you found? Is it just after a couple of days you were ready to go, or did you have to take a whole week in between sessions? I'm just curious.
No, I mean, I felt like since the first part of it seemed like it was the most intense memories, those were the ones that took a little longer. And then as we kind of went along and the memories were, I mean, it's kind of weird to rank memories of trauma, but they felt easier, and they felt like my brain was learning to process it quicker too. So I would say the first couple of sessions might have been the ones that took a few days, that I felt like I was dreaming here and there. And I kind of wish I would have kept a journal. Honestly, I really should have kept a dream journal throughout that time, because it would have been so interesting to look back on months down the road. But yeah, and then like I said, the last ones, I felt like I was pretty much, I had been done processing it by the next day.
And I will say we don't meet more than once a week anyway. That's what he and I do. So it's
Yeah.
not as, I didn't meet him like every day.
Right.
And there were a few times that I could always tell, Kevin, if you were ready for EMDR or if it was not going to be a day for EMDR.
It was the headphones.
It was the headphones. If he was wearing his headphones, I would know that was my visual cue that he's ready for EMDR. If he wasn't wearing his headphones, then I knew he wasn't finished processing. And I think we commented on that a couple times. And so we talked about
Yeah.
other things and just didn't do EMDR in those sessions. So there were a couple times we had a week or two in between EMDR sessions.
Yeah,
Because he just wasn't ready.
I talked to even my wife and I said, I don't know if I can do MDR today, because it had been, besides processing and just maybe the week was a little harder that week and there was a lot of stuff going on. And I just remember thinking, I don't know if I can jump back into all that today, emotionally ready for that today.
Don't have a spoon for EMDR today.
Yeah, exactly.
Point. As you went through EMDR and you worked through your memories and it was becoming less and less traumatic, was there any a mental, let's see if I can word this correctly, was there a sense of feeling that came over to you, like a calmness or a peace, or did you feel like suddenly you were energized, you felt a happier perspective on life? What was that like, that process when you were beginning to slowly wind down trauma and then look at your life moving on from that? Was there like a long transition period of that? What did you feel? What did you think? What's that kind of like?
Yeah, it almost felt like a calmness, from I think the first one, it's like I felt like weight being lifted a little bit. I know that it's kind of the same cliche that everybody uses, but it did feel that there was less weight, and I was able to. Something that I had mentioned to Sandra is that I almost felt like I couldn't emotionally handle. I felt like I had so much stuff and going on, and I was in school and everything, and if I had one little thing added to that cup, it was just overflowing, and I just couldn't. I just was a mess. And as the EMDR progressed, everything slowly started becoming easier, and I felt more calmness. And then as it went along, I felt more acceptance. And then even now, I feel a lot more, like I said, forgiveness, that I almost feel like I can just move on from it. And that was the main thing. But it started with calmness. It was never energized by any means. It was always felt like I ran a marathon.
For me, I think you're spot on. For me, I knew it was working when I sat outside on my porch and did nothing for 20 minutes. If you know me,
Mhm.
that's a huge deal.
I'm not sure if you saw my eyebrows go up there, Kevin, but I do know Eric, and that is a big deal.
Yeah. And it was a sense of calmness that I hadn't experienced before. And that was the first time. That wasn't a perfect, straight, up. It was very jaggedy pattern. It wasn't perfect, but that was the first time I noticed, hey, things are changing. For me, I don't know. For me, I began to have a less of a sense of being overwhelmed by life. And I think that's kind of what you're hitting on. Is that kind of what
Yeah.
your experience was as well?
Yeah, and it was just small things, like if I was in school, you're gonna have to write a paper, or my sister all of a sudden needed me to watch my nephews, and that just, to me, before, that seemed like an overwhelming, like, oh, I don't know if I can, and it almost felt like the weight of the world. And it sounds so small and minuscule now when I say it, but back then it felt like you were asking a lot. And the main thing that I noticed is being able to sleep better, because I had, when I started therapy, I was starting to have trouble sleeping, and then I would wake up in the middle of the night, like I said, just up, and I was up for hours. And then now it's like I started being able to sleep through the night a lot more. Maybe my brain was just so tired that it just couldn't wake up. But
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. That was for me. I actually started sleeping more. I was actually getting 6 hours of sleep as opposed to 4. Um, I'm still working on that. But yeah, it's interesting how the process changes, and it's for little changes, I'd imagine. For me, it was not every day was overwhelming. For me, it was not every day was a fight or flight. It was just work. I get up and go to work, and it sounds like that was your experience too.
Mhm.
Did you see a difference, if you mind me asking, and you don't have to answer, did you see a difference in how you related to those around you? Um,
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Um, yeah, I started becoming less irritated by people, and that makes me sound like so mean, but
no,
Kevin's
No,
never been
not at
mean,
all.
so.
but
people are
I
people.
do. But when people, I was able to be more caring, and just more. I felt like I could give people more time, if that makes any sense. It's where before I was almost. How am I trying to say this? I was almost just thinking about. I was thinking about others, but it was almost like, now I felt like I had the capacity to be able to take in everybody's either problems, or if they needed me, or just time. And that felt like I was more, yeah, I guess more, just like I said, it just felt like my cup was a little more empty, and I could fill it up more. And that was the main thing with others.
Kevin, is it okay if I ask about your relationship with your dad?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
My dad and I had a rocky relationship, most of, especially, like, because I grew up thinking my dad was, everybody kind of does for a while, that he was like a superhero. And uh, me and my dad spent a lot of time together in Argentina. He would take me to all my soccer games and everything. And and it was almost heartbreaking when everything started happening. And then I figured out the real reason why we had moved to the United States. And um, it was very hard. And I had even mentioned to you, I have a studio in where they live, and I could tell my dad throughout the years has constantly been trying to maybe make more of an effort without mentioning it. And he started setting up all his tools, and then he was wanting to work on projects while I would make pottery. And it just wasn't, to me, I wasn't ready for that yet. And I immediately would feel that tightness and anger. That was the main thing that I felt. I remember every time that my dad would come around, I was short with him, and I'd be a little more angry, whether I meant to or not. But then now, as everything's progressed, I'm able to, like, we just talked on the phone the other day for no reason, which is that if you knew anything about our relationship, it's milestones ahead from what it used to be. And I'm able to just go and kind of see him, and slowly but surely, it's baby steps. We're getting our relationships becoming closer and closer. I feel it. I don't feel that anger, and I feel like I actually want to talk to him and see how he's doing all the time. And yeah, one of these days we'll have that conversation about forgiveness, but
Yeah.
we'll get there.
Day at a time,
Yeah.
right?
One day at a time.
Yeah.
One
So
day in 2020.
maybe 2021. Just kidding.
January 1st, 2021.
I know everything will
Right.
change. So Kevin, if we have listeners out there wondering about EMDR or even about therapy who've had trauma, what would you say to them if they were thinking about it and facing how scary therapy, or just even the thought of going to therapy, would be?
yeah, it's a lot scarier of a thought than what it actually is, you know, and I wish it was more commonplace for people to go to therapy. I mean, I think anybody could use therapy, some sort of therapy to better themselves. And like we kind of mentioned that it is like, even, you know, we physically try to take care of our bodies, but our mental health is it's just as important, you know, if not more important. And to me, I wish that I would have gone to therapy a long time ago, and it would have helped me a lot earlier. But I'm here now, and I just, if anybody's out there struggling with it, with, you know, anything that they don't know, you know, even the smallest thing, therapy can be a huge help and allow you to you know, be, you know, mentally the best person you can be. And it's just taking that first step. And I know that's the scariest part, is taking that step. And, you know, I think I told you, I'm very honest with my friends when I say, oh, I can't today. I had therapy at that time, you know, and they would look at me like I was crazy, but you know, it's just a stigma we have about therapy, which is very sad because it could help a lot of people out there.
I had kind of wanted to come back around to this before, because we'd said, you know, at the beginning when we were thanking you for being here, and you had remarked that, you know, that it was harder, you know, starting therapy, or that was scarier. And I know that you'd said that, you know, that the anxiety attacks were really starting to pile up. The decision to, or I should say, the decision on not to start therapy sooner, do you feel like ego had anything to do with that? Or was it just like, I can still handle this, I'm okay? Was it maybe like a perceived sense of weakness that you were afraid of others seeing? Did those factor in at all?
Maybe, yeah. And I think all those played a role in it. And I would say what made me kind of want to get started on it is I had a friend who was in therapy, and, you know, and I just remember thinking, oh, there's somebody who's in therapy that I respect. And I thought I think it's time. And that kind of made my mind change a little bit, you know, because, you know, we look at movies and people who are in therapy in movies, and you just go, oh yeah, somebody's going to be off the wall to go to therapy.
They have to be an absolute neurotic mess, or
yeah, you know, and you think somebody's going to look at you and say it's not your fault and repeat it 50 times, and you're going to cry. And but it's not.
Sorry, I'm laughing at that one, but okay. Half my clients and I went, it's your fault, say you're sorry.
But yeah, I mean,
how could you?
But it was a little bit of all that, you know, and then also not knowing where to go. That's a big one too. I feel like it's not like a hospital that you can just go walk into and say, hey, I need help for my anxiety. They would probably give you pills, which is not what I wanted by any means. But yeah, that's kind of, I'm glad I found it.
Yeah.
Also,
I think we all are.
Yes. It's also the match between the client and the counselor. So if any of you go and try to find counseling and you don't feel like it's a good fit, it may just not be a good fit. And so find another counselor. Studies show, all the metadata and meta-analyses show that no matter what type of therapy that you use, the most important factor in good clinical outcomes and improvement in mental health is the client-counselor relationship. That's the most important factor in all of it. So, you know, it's okay to go around until you find one that fits you. It doesn't mean anything bad with the ones that don't fit. It just may be not a good fit. So don't be afraid to do that either. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I got very lucky. That's why I tell myself.
Oh yeah, I got lucky with Kevin. So he's been fun for me to, like, you know, torture each week.
Well, at least she's honest.
Yeah, I could lie about it.
Well, it used to be me. Now it's you, Kevin. I'm okay with that.
Oh, hey.
Torch has been passed.
All right.
Yeah, torch has been passed.
It's an honor.
No.
Well, I'm looking at time. We're going to have to stop. I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
wow.
It has flown through. It's already been over an hour. Kevin, thank you. Your bravery.
Absolutely.
I want to aspire to. It's to tell such an intimate story and put it out into the world for all posterity. That's pretty amazing.
Uh-oh, reality just set in. Forget it.
Buyer's remorse.
And listeners, we just kind of want to reiterate, obviously Kevin and Sandy have a relationship here, the professional one. But I mean, Eric and Kevin and I just met each other a little over an hour ago before we started recording. So it was just, again, it's not easy to do necessarily, but we really thank you for your time and for being willing to be so open and such a great guest for us this week.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a great experience.
Oh, good. I'm glad we didn't make it too torturous for you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing your truth with us.
Absolutely. We'd love to see you again soon. For those that are listening, you guys brought up a good point for those who are listening. Don't wait. If you feel like it's time to get some help and get some therapy, it's nothing to be ashamed of. In fact, if you've listened to our show for a hot minute, you'll know how much we are supporters of therapy. There's different ways out there to get therapy. Certainly Google it and find someone close to you. That's the easiest way to do it. That's how I found my therapist. I think that's how Kevin found Mom. But you can also get by word of mouth. Just start asking questions. And in fact, we believe in therapy so strongly here on our show. Contact us, DM us on our Facebook page and say, I don't know how to get started. And I'm sure we can provide some information that will help. We'd be glad to do that. We just want to make sure everybody gets the help that they need. So thank you again, Kevin, and thank you, Mom, for taking it, introducing us to Kevin. And Brandon, thank you for your insights. Well, I've been Eric, and we've been joined by other two hosts, my best friend Brandon, my mom,
Go.
and Kevin.
Yo.
And for those that are listening, if you want to contact us, I almost forgot, you can find us on our Facebook page, which is You, Me, and Your Mom. You can also find us on our Instagram page, which is You, Me, Your Mom Podcast. And you can also find us on Twitter, which is You, Me, Your Mom. And you can also email us. You can check us out there, which is You, Me, Your Mom 99@gmail.com. That's You, Me, Your Mom 99@gmail.com. And that's spelled YOUMEYOURMOM 99@gmail.com. I've never been more attracted to you. Thank you, sir.
That's a new tune. Good job. Yes.
I love it. Well, wherever you are in the big wide world, just remember, it can always get worse. We'll see y'all later.
Bye.